Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the session just before lunch. So we thank you for coming to see us and not going off early to get some refreshment. But if you've not met with me before, my name is Jeff Nott. I've been with Alfresco for 5 years. It's been a very interesting time for me, particularly because different regions, as far as public sector is concerned, have taken different timescale to really embrace Alfresco. So the title of this session, as you can see, is Putting Content to Work in Public Sector. And it's my pleasure to have a panel here that have a good deal of experience of doing just that, using Alfresco to put content to work for the respective users. I won't introduce them by name until I give them the mic, because you can read up here who they are and what their roles are. But the format that I propose that we follow is I've asked each of them to give maybe a 10-minute introduction so you understand how it is they chose Alfresco and what they're doing with Alfresco. And then the value for this session, I think, is for us to take questions from you, maybe to ask specifics about their experience of how they've rolled out and how they're working on their projects. So we have some questions that have already been submitted, so hopefully that will get things moving. But the opportunity for you is to ask questions of people that have the battle scars, if we put it that way. So that's all the conversation you're going to get from me. We spun a coin, almost spun a coin, and Filip Lannoye from CIRB has kindly agreed to start the presentation. So I'll hand over to Filip.
Thank you, Jeff, and welcome everybody in this most freezy room from the entire summit, I guess. So, my name is Filip Lannoye. I've been working with CIRB for nearly 10 years now. CIRB stands for Centre d'Informatique pour la Région Bruxelloise. It's IT service provider for the Brussels capital region in Belgium. So we service all local authorities of the Brussels region. Local authorities, this means the 19 municipalities, the associated social welfare offices, and all other organizations you might have, like the parliament, the cabinets of the ministers, the fire workers, the Port of Brussels, so a lot of organizations there. We have been working with Alfresco for nearly 7 years now, and we are very enthusiastic about it. We're actually using an enterprise license today, so it has become one of our big standards today. And when I go back to the early 2006 years, well, we had one of the municipalities asking us to help them to automate the composition and the preparation of their councils. You imagine office workers from a local authority having to propose a point that needs a decision from the mayor and his deputies. Well, this point in the early years had to be prepared on paper, with attachments, with plans printed out. They go in binders to their responsibles, they come back with notes, they return, they get signatures. You see the picture. We are 2013. I know a lot of local authorities where they still work in this way. So there's still work to do. Now, in the first days, well, we adopted a community version of Alfresco to start to give it a try and with try and error. And so we found it was quite easy to use. So this was the first really application we tried to build then. But one of the problems we had at that moment was to get further with it and to create a real application, to have it hosted in our facilities, since we also host our own applications for our customers. And we had also a problem to have appropriate support on the Belgian territory. So finally we found one of the first Belgium integrators was helping us with the development. And basically, I'm very honest with you, we started the development 2 times over afterwards. The first version was crap, as easy as that. And so before going live, were a lot of problems, and so we started all over. But in the meantime, there were coming up more and more providers, also in Belgium, also in Brussels. And so there we tried to work on a better basis And so this brings me like 3 years back, where with 2 municipalities we could really work in a pilot modus, and we entered in a kind of a collaborative mode with them. So as for myself, I don't do development at all. I'm responsible of a team of service managers. And so I'm amongst the ITIL guys, SLA, OLA, all that kind of stuff. And so we can play, I always say, when it's too late. So I don't go with the choices, but when an application is ready to go live and where misery is seen, where the users are complaining, well, there's my team active. We understood all this, and so we work together up front. So even my service managers today, they participate in the functional analysis. They go on-premise, they go discuss and with the project guys and the developers. They work together with the key users, with the stakeholders, to get them on board and to adapt the processes even. This is also a point I would like to stress with you. We have this capacity to federate and to bring these people together from different organizations who have the same needs in the background. And so it's through this IT and through this application that other municipalities are coming to us now today to ask us to deploy the same application on their premise. And it's also a condition, it's also an opportunity for them to adapt their own internal organization. So this means it works in the background. So now I come back to my 2 pilot municipalities. They were so enthusiastic since they participated in the roadmap of the application, in the final setup. They are also active in the testing. And so they become our own sponsors on the field. Of course, we keep a good contact with them. We see them in trainings, we see them in demos, we see them in user clubs we organize, and so this is continually growing. Okay, 2 pilots. So at the moment we go live and it's officially a production environment. Then comes this matter of scaling up and scaling out. Scaling up, since for the same organizations we are going to have more and more users. The first municipality, there are like 200 daily users. So each office worker has the ability to enter points and to get started a certain workflow in the background. Then we had this second municipality, which was way bigger. And so we had to host them, like 2 instances on the same production server with the same development server in the background. Okay. But then you see the misery coming up. You have some tuning to do for the first instance, which does not necessarily apply to the second one. But you will have a kind of a downtime to install a new version or whatever, and this downtime is also impacting the second environment. And so there we said, okay, now we need a second or third server even, and we need more capacity. So on the one side, having more users on the same server, on the other side, having a need to have more servers beside. And then there's this very funny thing which is called in the public sector tenders. And we know a big deal about it. And so there we find a way out. I'm very creative at that level. We found a way out to give us the means to obtain and to negotiate an enterprise contract with Alfresco, which we are having now for 2 years, and we're taking an enormous benefit of it. So now, today, for the same application I'm talking about, so this council preparation environment, we are already running in production on 8 different servers. We have the equivalent of development servers behind. Besides, we're working now on another project, which is also to cope with an obligation of public authorities. They have to keep tracks of all incoming and outgoing paper mail. So all letters that are coming in, they are scanned, they are OCR, they follow a workflow, etc. And so we are in the middle of deploying this project as well. And right from the start, we have the idea to provide it in a SaaS model afterwards. So we are first of all deploying it in our own company, and then we are going to provide it to other organizations as well. And so there we need as well the same capacity. Of course, letters coming in from citizens, from organizations, whatever, there are a lot of cases where they also need a bypass through a decision from the council. And so there's a question coming up from integration and to have pieces coming in from one application, quitting a kind of a workflow, going to the other workflow, following the same track, getting back, and go through to the end. So we know this is one of the big things we will work on in the coming months. So, and are really deserving also the same customers, but not necessarily the same. Huh? Then there is a third big application we already run for several years, which is one that allows us to automate everything has to do with construction and environmental permits. The deliverance of it, as been stated in Brussels region, has to be done electronically through the application X, which we built and which we delivered and which we deployed for the entire administration. So this gives us also credibility, this gives us also a perennity, very interesting to do. Besides that, the application is 7 years old. She was very good, she has grown very quickly, and now it's time to replace it. So this is a new phase which is already started. We also do this on Alfresco, and there's also a bridge to be made with this council preparation application. So I guess in 3 to 4 years, I come back to see you to say we only work on Alfresco anymore, huh? Isn't it, Jeff? The last area where we use Alfresco is to answer to customers who ask to have a kind of a Dropbox-like, wiki-like, I don't know, environment to share big files. This is an environment where I really don't, I'm not very happy with it myself, since what kind of a service can we deliver around it? We take enormous risk there, since it is a service offering which we provide for free. And so there's this capacity issue. How many documents are people going to store there? To who is it going to be open? Who is going to deal with access rights, users, and something? So it is there, but it's not very well managed today. And so there's also one of the messages I would like to give you here. For this kind of application, be sure to have a process owner, be sure to have someone who manages all this. Otherwise, it doesn't work, it is catastrophe. So that's in a nutshell what we are working on Alfresco with today. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Filip. We'll be coming back to Filip. So I'd like to hand over to Ricardo Cavero from Zaragoza.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm grateful for being here, sharing our experience with Alfresco. I'm the Chief Information Officer of the Zaragoza City Council. I'm in charge of innovation projects within the organization, but also those aimed at promoting the knowledge society in the city. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the internal projects. We've been working with Alfresco since 2010. First of all, with community approach, and since 2011 with the enterprise implementation. Our main goal that I want to rise up today is that we are trying to implement a full administration for the whole organization, which means basically that we are running two main projects. One, a technology project, and then also, which is a pain, process re-engineering process within the whole organization, counting on every stakeholder in every area, on every department. We are going towards a zero-paper organization, of course, which means three basic ideas. First, every document that we create within the organization must be a digital document. Second, paper documents coming from other administrations, citizens, companies, third parties will be digitized prior to enter the administration, otherwise it will be dropped. And third, for us, a digital document must be signed, digitally signed, all of them, and with has to include a set of metadata in order to keep track of what's going on with all those documents. Policy IT constraints that I think is important to know at this point. We try to use open source solution whenever we can, whenever there is a suitable solution in the market. Alfresco is one of those. We have to integrate everything with our digital signature system, corporative system, or our digital certificating system. Every public employee within the organization owns a digital certificate in order to access our application, our solutions, but also to sign digital documents already. We have to keep, or try to keep, from the IT perspective, an integrative vision for all the vertical approach that is common in organizations such as big city council. We have to follow the metadata policy already approved by the council. It is defined by the archiving manager, and it's terrible to follow everything what we have to accomplish in order to be normative compliant. And we always try to count on local partners when implementing a technical solution like Alfresco. And for this we have Kingsoft, which is a small company which is doing a great job with us in the City Council. So after years of testing different solutions for the e-administration project, going back and forth and making the appropriate mistakes, we have chosen Alfresco as our corporative system for manage all the documents within the electronic administration system. So as a matter of fact, it's going to be the core tool that manage the metadata policies, as I mentioned, defined by the archive department. Three main projects that I want to raise up today to illustrate what we are, how we are using Alfresco. The first, long-term archiving system. So we are developing an archiving system for long-term storage of documents within the organization. It's going to be the collector for every document that we produce during the e-file process or any other document created within the organization. All the documents will be stored in the Alfresco under archiving system. We have developed a Java solution for this, but everything, main features, are delegated to Alfresco, like content storage and management, metadata, validation rules, advanced search, and etc. Okay? What we get is a central and unique repository for electronic documents for the whole organization. Later on, we can access these documents through Alfresco Share or any other third-party developments that we are going on now. We are going to manage the life cycle metadata for all the documents. This is a key issue for us because it has underneath legal issues, legal stuff with metadata. Content traceability and normalization. We are managing PDF/A, so no matter what type of document we get from the municipality, from the citizen, from companies, we convert it to PDF/A and we store it in Alfresco with the proper metadata. And we are getting advantage already with the powerful search engine, which is already very demanded by the end users. Second project, we are under a massive digitizing process of paper, notifications, tax receipts, everything. We are speaking about 700,000 documents, paper documents a year, and we have developed a process to get everything of this inside Alfresco as well. So we count on third-party companies that help us to scan all the documents. We get a PDF/A with a signature with metadata for every paper document. Then we make a batch upload into Alfresco, and then we make a random check to see how things are going with this, this scanning process. Afterwards, we get all those documents ready to go for the whole organization. Third project interesting for us is our corporative document mailing system. It's pretty much like a diplomatic bag. As my colleague mentioned, we still are moving paper. We spend a lot of money with a lot of people moving paper among sites within the organization. So we are getting this system in order to move paper in an easy way, but in a reliable and irrefutable manner. This is important for us. Every paper has to be signed. We have to get a receipt for every paper that is moving toward other business units. So this is important, really important for us. And also, this is working as a workspace and archive space for every business unit within the organization. Okay, so of course it's going to be linked with the organization structure. Is allowing us also to define document typology for every document in order to be compliant with the archiving policy that we have already approved within the organization. And in a second phase, next year, we are planning to integrate this system with the copy machine system, just to make easy for public employees, right, to scan a document and send it automatically to to the cloud, to archiving system for every business unit. This is going to happen next year. I think I'm almost done. Why Alfresco? Well, this is an open source solution, and this is something that we are happy to use. It's in use by other administrations, so it's easy for us to share experiences with other councils, with other regions, even with the national government. It is flexible in terms of adaptation and a constant evolution roadmap, powerful search engine, and the most important thing is going to help us to achieve our goals in life cycle e-document management in order to make sure that we can keep legal document, e-file documents for the whole life cycle, and make sure that everyone access to all those documents in a proper manner in the future. So this is my very brief presentation. I will be happy to answer questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. So Nick Gaunt is the former CIO at NHS Institute for Innovation and Improvement, beg your pardon. So hand over to Nick.
Thanks very much, Jeff. I'll paint a little bit of an outline of my organization and the challenges we were faced, and some of the path we took to the choice of Alfresco and an implementation, then hand to my colleague John, who works for runs the company that implemented it for us. My organization is part of the National Health Service in England. It's a national organization that is focused on helping the other parts of the National Health Service, the hospitals and clinics, improve the way they deliver services. So the organization, which was set up in 2005, focused on preparing advice mainly as documents, but also as training materials and some direct support to organizations to offer that advice on how to improve. For several years, the organization generated thousands of documents, published them on their website, and handed them out as paper product, beautifully packaged in boxes and files. But our goal was always to work towards a digital document capability. The problem became evident in 2010 that we needed a way of repurposing documents, because it became clear that the organization was wasting many man-months in recreating the same content rather than reusing it. Before I go on to the story of why we then got to Alfresco, I'll also paint some of the problems that we have as a public sector organization, and I'm sure many of you will understand these problems. We are subject to the political vagaries of our government and the national health system. Being a national organization, we are technically, or we were, technically classed as a quasi-autonomous national governmental, non-governmental organization, a quango. And our government, like many others, went through a rationalization and said we should have no quangos. And as a result of that, many of our fellow organizations were abolished, but for some reason we managed to survive a few years. But by 2010, were being told you must become private or at least a social enterprise, move out of the Quango category. And so our strategy, which had been originally focused on an assumption of continuing as a national body, started to change, and we had to think about losing the access to the NHS licensing for Microsoft products, for example. So we would no longer have for free Microsoft Office products and SharePoint, which is what we had been using. So we moved strategically to cloud-based solutions where possible, open source solutions where possible, and looking very much at what the return on investment would be were we to become an autonomous, fully autonomous organization. As it happens, my organization closed in 2013, March 2013, which is why I'm a former CIO. Technically, I'm the CIO of a former organization, but so we to go back to the story of why we chose Alfresco, then understanding that history, we were also working as a public organization in 2009, 2010, using the major contract providers that the government had negotiated. So we were using a major consultancy company. And when we chose Alfresco, said we wanted to go out open source, we wanted to use Alfresco, they said, we have a team of developers in the Netherlands who are using Alfresco, so we're happy to support you. So we had a very painful implementation that turned out, in your language, to be crap, and had to be abandoned very quickly. It never became usable. We recognized very painfully from that experience as well that we needed to implement in an agile way and gain the benefits from the system as quickly as possible. So we chose Monetical as our implementer because they have expertise in agile implementation as well as their expertise in Alfresco. Now, one of the use cases that we have, or the prime use case that we have, is different from the other two speakers. We did not have a requirement that everything had to be managed as records. Our requirement was to be able to break out the content of the documents we had generated, to be able to repurpose and to have the same content reused for different use cases across the national health system. So while the ways of improving working practices in the health service are the same in a general practice family doctor setting or in a hospital, the language that is used is different. And so the same advice had to be repurposed and repackaged and rebranded, if you like, for different audiences in the health service. So we were very keen to look at ways of extracting the content and using metadata to classify the content and be able to bring it together. So we embarked on that development alongside the document development. Now, the journey that we took towards our closure, as I say, swang from being commercial and having to think about how we were going to make profit from sharing these records, back to, oh my goodness, we're going to close in 6 months' time. We need to make sure that our thousands of records and good advice that we've generated and that the health service was using remain accessible and can be used as long as possible into the future. So we moved very rapidly from our original installation of an on-premise Alfresco solution to a cloud-based solution. And I'd like now to hand over to John to tell some of the story of the implementation.
Thank you. Okay, my name is John Abram. Yeah, I'm the managing partner at Monetical. We've been implementing Alfresco for around about 5 years now. Nick and his organisation is probably the most challenging one that we've faced for all of the reasons he's just given. Constantly, let's start with a good point. We both understood exactly what the end game was, which was to not develop a solution that was around document management, but actually content. So this was the words on the page and how they can actually be repurposed and obviously used in a variety of formats. So this was Word documents. It also included videos, PowerPoints, around about 450,000 pieces of content overall, divided into around about 200 individual topics, with about 150,000 active versions of those documents that were constantly being updated on a daily basis. We obviously had to develop a way in which we could break that existing content down into paragraphs, tag them so they could be searched and repurposed. But getting there wasn't exactly an easy ride. So the first thing was that we'd met Nick probably November 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago from now, I think. Yeah, 3. And this was November, and we'd heard that their experiences hadn't been too great with their previous system integrator. To be honest, Nick's heart rate was flying. It was pretty high. He might not admit it, but you could see panic in his eyes if I stared closely enough. So it was a case of, well, how can we take their existing implementation and get him up to speed as quickly as possible, where he at least could tick the box that he'd picked the right technology, which was Alfresco. So because the way that obviously Alfresco is architected and the way you can actually just download it, install it, it was actually very quick for us to actually get a basic implementation of Alfresco up and running within 3 or 4 days. So we'd broken up the whole path from putting out the fire to actually getting content into the system, breaking down the content in the system, and then actually going through a process of optimizing the search interfaces so they can actually extract paragraphs into a series of sprints. So this is where you take the big project and you break it into, say, stories, maybe last 2 or 3 months, breaking those down even further into some very, very short-term deliverables. So we did that over the course of around about 6 weeks, sort of up to Christmas. And then sort of in the new year, we then started looking at implementation. Constantly focusing on, well, let's at least prove the technology. Let's improve we have the capabilities to do this. And then we turned our attention to, obviously, well, what were we actually inheriting? So a couple of my system architects and the senior developer went in and had a look at their environment, and it's not very good. They decided to really start again. We just closed that machine, created another server, and started from scratch. So really from the 1st or 2nd of January through to the end of March, we'd gone through a whole cycle of implementing Alfresco, getting the users, single sign-on, importing round about 200,000 documents. And then there was a process that we then introduced where the users had a unaudited and an audited folder structure. So they were able, they had the ability to actually establish what state a particular document was in. So they went through over a period of about 3 months, moving content from one part of the repository to another. That probably got us through to about the summer. And I think by that point, Nick was pretty more relaxed. The Alfresco was up and running. It was being used on a daily basis. The number of users was still low, maybe low 20s. Content that was being used and edited on a daily basis probably climbed to maybe 3,000 or 4,000. And our attention then turned to, well, right, what's the end game? Just, as I mentioned earlier, content management wasn't really the key goal. The end game was to break the content into these small paragraphs so they could be repurposed. Very simple example. You take 10 documents in the repository today. Headline is, what is the purpose of the organization? There was 20 different versions of that same paragraph. Now, clearly, its charter hadn't changed, but there was obviously a lot of duplication and then obviously Chinese whispers, and it was very, very difficult to consolidate. So they would go through a process of identifying what was the best version of a particular piece of content. And then that would then hopefully become the master, the single point of truth thereafter. Another point that Nick referred to was obviously there was a requirement to move away from proprietary editing tools. Two reasons, obviously the licensing one that Nick's mentioned, and another one which is, I don't think you mentioned, which is this long-term requirement to have content around for 10, 20, 30 years. And it may be that in 10 or 20 years' time it might not be possible to find a version of Word that will actually allow you to edit or review a particular piece of content that's been sitting in the archive for a while. So we then looked at various third-party file formats, looking at converting the contents of Word documents, PowerPoints, PDFs into an open file format, and we selected DocBook as being the most appropriate. We then developed, because of the openness of Alfresco, we weren't sort of hit a roadblock, unlike potentially other proprietary solutions where we would have had to wait for them to release a DocBook module for their particular product. We were able to go out, write some, you know, not too difficult, but taxing interfaces for Alfresco, and then we just ran over the whole of the repository the DocBook conversion process. So we ended up with 2 versions of everything. So now the number of documents went from sort of 220,000 up to around about 500,000. And then there was a case of, right, now we need to establish what is the most appropriate piece of content that would then hopefully become the single point of truth, the master. We did some customizations around a searching capability, and then the ability to actually open up the DocBook format in a editing browser and actually tag individual words, sentences, paragraphs, and then obviously write that information back down to the repository and obviously enhance the searching. So I think that got through to probably the end of the year and things were looking pretty good. And then Christmas came again, and rather than it bringing good news, it brought bad news in terms of the organization wanting to go into a state of closure. Now, we were faced with, well, what do we do here? We didn't know what the new world would look like. So there was discussions around, well, actually, do we just take all the content out of Alfresco, and do we put it onto DVDs and then just hand that over? That's one option, but the transition from organization A to organization P was probably going to take maybe 12 months minimum, as we find out. It's actually we're in the 18th month as we speak. The alternative was to just leave it sitting there in the premises in Coventry near the business school, university. What we found, though, is that actual IT department had been disbanded, so there was only going to be one email administrator going to be on site, so that was not an option. The other option that we put out there, which eventually became the chosen, was actually to move entirely their on-premise customized Alfresco implementation to a private cloud. So we partnered with a cloud service provider over the following few months, and over a space of about 8 weeks, we moved everything, all users, all contents, all implementation, and each stage constantly benchmarking the system just to make sure that the performance would be at least the same as it was before. What we actually found is that the overall system was twice as fast in every respect, from just browsing the repository to actually doing advanced searches. Clearly all the layers of security and firewalls that were on the NHS system were removed. So right now the Alfresco implementation is sitting out there. There's a number of content editors that are constantly soliciting new content, pushing the organization, various departments to update content. And they've also started some other initiatives in the last few months where they wanted to gather as much research information around aftercare. So I think what they did there is they just sent out an email, went to various forums and solicited content, solicited research institutes to submit content. In the old world, it would have been quite tricky because they would have had to interface with the IT departments, and the actual process of uploading would be quite lengthy. What they've found is that because it's been out in the cloud, a lot of those traditional IT security issues have been not completely done away with, they're just been implemented in a more modern fashion way and using best technologies, where they've now got probably around about 45 contributors, some in Australia, some in Canada, South Africa, all around the world, which is something that's allowed them to actually say, hey, we actually have a system significantly more valuable than we thought was possible. Where Alfresco is going to be in the next few months, we'll just need to wait and see. At the moment, we just provide ongoing daily support. We have a support contract in place, which will take us up to the end of December, and we're left. Now just obviously waiting to sit down with the clients and hopefully understand what they want to do come January. So thank you. I'll pass it back to you.
So my thanks to the panel. There's a couple of takeaways I've picked up there, and I want to just cast this out to you in the audience, because some of the things I picked up on was the importance, I think, of metadata. Are you aware of the custom metadata capability through what Alfresco calls aspects? If not, it's something I'd actually encourage you to discuss with these guys here. Interesting you talk about tagging, John. Tagging is relatively new. I think it came in on the back of people's awareness of social, but that seems to be interesting. And I think the repeatability, particularly in what both Ricardo and Filip were saying, it seems to me that it's a case of investment once and getting the understanding of the technologies to work. So some interesting things there that I've picked up on. Now, what I'd like to do is ask you if there's any particular questions that you want to put to the panel. And if you haven't got a question, I've got a couple here that have been preloaded. So anybody want to raise a question at this time? Yeah, thank you. Just we're going to give you a mic so it gets recorded. And then
just hold this, yeah. Hello. Oh gosh, I really sound like that. Hi, I'm Simon. The decision to go to Alfresco, some of you have spoken to this already. The fact that it's an open source product, how did that influence the decision-making process, for good or for bad? And how do you feel the decision to acquire open source software in general is going down within your respective public sectors?
Should I start? Okay. Well, we are a pretty much open source organization. As a matter of fact, we are migrating the desktop to Linux and OpenOffice. And we have more than 1,000 desktop already going on with Linux and OpenOffice. Imagine a public employee using Linux in a daily basis. So I think open source is great, and it should be mandatory for any organization, in any public organization. And it's working for us because first we can count on partners close to our city. This is really a key factor when choosing a solution. And it is flexible for us in many aspects. So probably in the beginning when we choose Alfresco or any other open source solution, features weren't so good as we expected. But in the end, the community works and makes solutions better, and we are quite happy understanding that probably private proprietary solutions that we have to pay a lot of money are better. But we don't care. We are happy being part of that community and to grow Alfresco in this case.
Our situation is pretty much the same. So in the Brussels region, we have this appetite for open source as well. It even has been translated for 2 governments now. They wrote a few dispositions on that in their political agreement. So this gave us a basis as well. And so when we do tenders, there is a part of the attribution that is done based on the type of solution. It's a small part, but it is present. On the other hand, I'm a bit less enthusiastic than my Spanish colleague, since we were pioneers on several domains. As for OpenOffice, I can write novels on it. You want to know something? Google me, come to see me. I was one of the first project leaders on that in Brussels. And I also saw, one, it's not cheaper, and two, we were too early there. It was a lack of integration, there was a lack of local support, and so there were a lot of hidden costs behind. And so even though today we have like a stable solution, which is working fine, which is a competitive solution, well, it has been way, way, way too much expensive afterwards. At the same time, this puts a pressure on the proprietary solution providers. As we discussed about Microsoft, let's name them here. For our region, we work with EDU licenses, we work with government licenses. They almost give the licenses. So this becomes uncompatible, unbeatable. Now, as for Alfresco versus SharePoint versus Documentum, that's another level, of course. Then we work on server levels, and then we also are eager to have professional support in the background. So basically for us, the first start was really with the community version of Alfresco. And then we saw in these days also there was this kind of latency to have the latest developments. We really needed to have this good, stable solution, which we could acquire by buying the enterprise version. Or subscription, what is what's called? Huh? They don't say license, I believe. Huh? Subscription. I never understood the model, but okay, don't care. But now today, well, we are still working and discussing about this open source aspect of Alfresco for its openness, its flexibility, all the good things. I heard it this morning as well. But on the other hand, we deliberately chose the enterprise version to have this professional background there, and to be able to have stable versions and not to have any limits on that. But then there is a cost aspect as well. So it remains double.
I wish our history was as easy as an open door to open source. As you might have picked up from my comments earlier, we were dominated, and still are, the NHS is still dominated by Microsoft. It's a philosophical question, partly. I believe passionately in open source for public sector organizations. We're publicly funded. I don't want to see the developments that we put in place disappear. So we open sourced, returned to the community, the DocBook implementation and the experiences we've had with agile development, and John's done that for us, for that very reason. In fact, I have been, dare I say it, slightly disappointed in the lack of vibrancy of the community elements of Alfresco, because I was hoping that, having come from other open source projects, that there would be more uptake of open source community provided projects. But that's why we went that direction. I was able to argue against Microsoft, A, because the licensing, the national agreement was coming to an end, and B, because we were at that stage planning to becoming a social enterprise, a non-profit organization, and could well argue against having to spend large license fees on closed source. As to the costing, I agree. The life cycle costs of open source solutions, if you're going to use them as an enterprise solution, are not that much different from commercial proprietary solutions. We did think it was worthwhile also going for enterprise license or subscription, and we did that early on in order to have a robust platform. So yes, philosophically open source. In practice, I'm not sure that we would have got there if we had stayed as an NHS organisation. It would have been a battle slightly too hard, even though our national government is saying open source is the way forwards.
So I've got to tell you that we're actually out of time now. So if there are any more questions, please can I invite you to come and talk with the panelists individually. Lunch is back over in the main building where the keynote was this morning, and I'd like to thank you for your attention and for coming and joining us. Thank you.